Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose the high control religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Today's episode is personal to me. It features somebody that I know, that I knew in my own congregation when I was growing up, and it shows the damage that can be done through the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses. You're going to see how the cult and the culture around and in it can really steal a person's life. Of course, you're also going to get to see how a person can come back from the depths of despair and find happiness in life. Kacey is telling this story even though it could have some ramifications for her personally, and she's taking a stand today. So many people have been hurt by this cult, and lives are ruined or even destroyed at times. And it may be that we all have that point in time where we know we have to take a stand for truth. You know, I remember being a kid, and there was a relative of Kacey's that was out knocking on doors with my mom out in field service. I remember my mom coming back to the car and telling us how bold her relative was because something she said at the door, she told the woman, "Well, ma'am, sometimes the truth hurts." And, you know, we all thought that was so great. Oh, you know, how witty that she told this lady in response to some objection the lady had to something she had said that, you know, that sometimes the truth hurts. Well, you know, who would have thought that so many years down the road we would have all found that out to be true? The truth hurts. Jehovah's Witnesses that would listen to this would be agitated by it. And why? Because the truth hurts. This podcast and others like it hurt them. Why? Because it's the truth. And they'd rather hide behind convenient lies, having their ears tickled, as they used to say, and they aren't concerned with actual truth, but rather with the truth, their religion. So let's hear Kacey's story, learn about her life, and how it was impacted by growing up as one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
My name is Kacey. I am 34 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right. So then, how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? How old were you?
When I was about 2 or 3 years old, my mom started studying with the witnesses. So I don't really remember anything but going to the Kingdom Hall and being a Jehovah's Witness. I have like some spotty memories of. I remember riding a tricycle when I was about 3 years old, and my mom and dad telling me that my dad had bought that for me for my third birthday. But I don't remember like ever celebrating any holidays or anything. I don't remember that being a birthday party. I just remember having a cool red tricycle. So, um, my mom and my aunt and my uncle and their mom, my grandmother, they had all studied with the witnesses at random times in their life. I know my mom studied, I think when she was about 14 or 15, she studied and went to meetings for a while, but it didn't really take, there was no commitment made there when they were younger. That didn't come until my mom started studying when I was about 2 or 3 years old.
How old do you think she was then when she started, studying again for the second time?
Probably around my age, in her 30s.
So there's a
Let's
pretty
say,
big gap there.
yeah, like 15, 20-year gap. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing how, once you're exposed to the religion, it kind of seems to stick with you. Even
Yeah.
if you get away from it like that, she was just a kid, she studied, but yet, here,
Yeah.
decades later, it's coming back into her life.
Yeah. And one thing about my mom is she went through some trauma with my brothers and a guy that she had dated. And at the point in her life when the sister knocked on our door when I was 2, I really think my mom was just looking for something to cling to. And see, this was familiar because she had already studied it for a while when she was younger.
Yeah.
So in her mind, I think that like it just came full circle because, Jehovah was trying to lead her back or something. I mean, I never really asked her a lot about it. She won't talk about any of the trauma that she experienced. So that's just my own personal like perspective. perspective, I guess.
Oh, no, 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 that makes total sense. I think a lot of people are attracted to the religion because it's a sense of surety. It's a
Mhm.
prescribed path that you can take, and you know, you can hand over traumas and things like that to something that you perceive as bigger than you. So
Yeah.
I can definitely understand why that would happen. Um, so then you were pretty young, and it doesn't go back many generations. It's, you know, just to your grandmother, um, who studied later in life as well. Um,
Mhm.
as for you, what did it mean to you back then? You know, when you were
Um,
a kid growing up in it.
well, it was confusing. My life was really confusing. My dad was raised Catholic and very, very strictly opposed to my mother studying with the witnesses. My dad's family is the type of family that, while they love each other, they put most of the focus on their family time around holidays. So you're talking Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. Those would be like big times for my dad's family to get together. And then they probably wouldn't see each other for the months in between the holidays. So it was really hard for my dad to accept that my mom was converting to this religion where there were no holidays, there were no birthdays. She spent so much time away from home, and he was really opposed. Like I remember as a child, my family dynamic, especially around Christmas, for the week before Christmas, the week of, and the week after, my parents barely spoke. My dad would just kind of walk past us like we weren't even there.
Wow.
Um, yeah, like he was really, really upset about it. It caused a lot of arguments and fighting between my parents. But, my mom stood firm because that's what she was told to do. Uh, and my dad stood firm because he was a mama's boy. My dad and his brothers were just raised by their mom. They never had their dad. So he would have done anything to keep his mom happy. He didn't want his mom to think badly of him.
Sure.
So and it's the way he was raised. He went to Catholic high schools. So it's just something that was, I guess, probably one of their biggest arguments, and something that tore them apart for many, many years when I was a child. And other than that, um, growing up as a Jehovah's Witness in school was horrible. Like I hated it. I wanted to be like the other kids. I've always been like a little bit of an awkward kid. I have older brothers. Uh, I've always been more like I've always been more into rock music and metal. Like I mean, my two older brothers are 8 and 12 years older than I am, and so when my mom and dad were at work, they would babysit me, and it would just be like a party with them. We were like rocking to Pantera and Slayer, and they're smoking cigarettes out the back door, and I see this, and I'm just like, my brothers, you're so cool. So I was always like the awkward kid. I wasn't the cheerleader or the dance team or um, I was I was the captain of the safety patrol at my elementary school. A
Rocking out
total
the Slayer.
bookworm. Yes, a total bookworm. Like people didn't like me, so I decided I didn't like people. They all made fun of me because I was a Jehovah's Witness. Because of course, on those first days of school, when I have to go to my teacher and say, "Hey, here's this tract or pamphlet on why I can't salute the flag," and my mom sends letters saying, make sure that she goes to the library if there are any holiday celebrations or birthday celebrations. You have to, single her out and take her to the library. So that was my life, books.
Yeah,
And so that's what I did, was just bury myself in books.
that makes sense. You got to escape, however you can. Try to find your place.
Yeah.
So then, that's what it was like at school. What about at home? What was your life like at home growing up? I mean, you said a little bit about being babysat by your brothers. Now, your brothers, were they witnesses at that time?
My older brothers never got baptized into the religion.
Okay.
My They are not my dad's biological children, but you would never know that because my dad adopted them. Like he loves those boys. You know, they call him dad. He says those are his sons.
Cool.
Um, but they were older. I guess my mom just didn't enforce it on them the same way she did us because they rebelled a little bit. And while they would go to the meetings, um, they were never in it. You know what I mean? They were like physically and mentally out from the beginning. They weren't buying it. They were too old. They were already into their own things. And so I just think that my mom put more emphasis on me because I was young enough that she could raise me up right in it, you know,
Yeah.
whereas my brother, she couldn't. So, and then my brothers also, both of them, um, fell in love and got a girl pregnant at a very young age. My oldest brother, I think he had his first daughter when he was 16 or 7. I think I was 4 when she was born. And then my second oldest brother, when he was 15, um, had been seeing a girl who was 21 and got her pregnant.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and that was like a huge scandal. And, you know, but he wanted to do the right thing. So at age 16, when their child was born, they may have even gotten married right before my nephew was born. But he moved out, you know, when he was like 15 and started going uh, to I can't remember what the name of the high school is. You work half a day and you go to school half a day.
Oh, that makes sense. Like a co-op type thing or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, so he could, and they lived together and raised their child. Um, for me, I also have a younger brother who he has some mental and physical limitations. He has autism and cerebral palsy. Um, and so most of the focus in my house was really put on him.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of, I was expected to just do the right thing. Like I wasn't allowed to mess up as a kid. Like it wasn't acceptable for me to just do things that kids do. I kind of had to always be mature and always realize that my little brother comes first. And now as an adult, like of course he comes first because he has, um, of course he comes first. You know, he has
Yeah, he has he
limitation.
has yeah, a lot of needs.
Yeah. And it's now I understand, but as a child, I was just starved for, like, I wanted attention, you know?
Sure.
Uh, so I would get really hyper and act out and run around. And, you know, I wasn't always that way. I remember a time where I would just like sit on the floor with the coloring book all day and color for hours. Um, Other than that, my dad was an alcoholic, and so he was very abusive. He was very verbally and emotionally abusive. And as I got older, I don't want to say he was physically abusive and like he beat me every day, but if he came home and had enough to drink, and I didn't do, if there was like a couple dishes left in the sink, uh, I was catching one to my backside for sure. And my dad is a very big man, and I honestly don't think that in his sober mind he would have ever done anything like that.
Yeah.
But it made for a very like tumultuous childhood and kind of walking on eggshells. I never knew if my dad was going to be drunk when he came home or or what was going to happen. It caused a lot of anxiety, and I just remember having a really confusing childhood as far as like
Yeah.
not knowing where I belonged.
That sounds very confusing. I mean, you know, on the one hand, you have the religious divide between Jehovah's Witnesses and Catholicism, and you know the obvious rift that that caused. You know, around holidays and just different factions of the family, and then you've got you know you're your own person and you're trying to make it, but then you know at school you're ostracized because you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and then your dad's this he's got his own issues, and I'm sure that made you feel very isolated there, even at home. So yeah, it would be hard to feel like you fit in. Did you feel like, so then what about at the Kingdom Hall? Did you feel like you fit in there? How was life, as a child there in the church?
No. I, I never I never felt like I fit in. Well, most of the girls there were actually growing up in that hall a decent amount of kids that were around my age, guys
Mhm.
and girls. And so there were plenty of girls for me to like go to their house or whatever, or spend time with, or play with, or call my friend. However, my dad wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and most of their dads were, and their dads were elders. And like I said, I was always kind of a weird kid or an awkward kid. I didn't really follow the the dress code, and it was it was rough. There were times where so one instance I can remember is that when I was about 12, I had been invited to a slumber party for the girls in my congregation. And I was so excited because I thought the tide is turning, like the things are going to change. I'm going to have friends. I'll actually have somebody that I can talk to, and I thought they wanted me there.
Yeah.
We get there, and it's really, I'm super nervous because I don't know how to act in front of other girls. I was raised with all boys, and as a Jehovah's Witness, you don't get to play with other kids that you go to school with. You don't get to play with kids in your neighborhood, or I didn't. Some may, but I never got to do those things. The only girls that I had in my life were my cousins, and they were both very tomboyish, just like I was.
Mm.
I didn't know how to mix with girls who were girly and did their hair and painted their nails. And so we go to this slumber party, and we're in the basement of one of the girls' grandmothers. And so the girl that was hosting this sleepover looks at me at some point during the night and says, the only reason you're here is because my grandma was going to cancel my summer party if I didn't invite you.
Oh, that's welcoming.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I just pretty much sat in the corner by myself for the rest of the night, fighting back tears because I didn't want to let them know that it got to me. And I so wanted their acceptance. I just wanted to be a part of. And that hurt.
Yeah.
And
That's awful.
there were a few other times where they would have sleepovers and invite me, but then it's always in the back of my head that the only reason I'm here is because somebody's mom forced them to invite me. So then they would I should preempt this by saying, as I was growing up, we had some issues in our house as well. Jehovah's Witnesses would not say your house is haunted. They would just say, like, you have demons, or
Mm.
you've brought an item into your house that a demon has attached to, or whatever. But we had really, really crazy things that were happening in our house. My dad, he got punched like in the face one night, and there was nobody there. He had physical marks on his body from being attacked. My toys would move all on their own. I had a Teddy Ruxpin doll, and he would open and close his eyes and move his head and his arms, and it was really scary.
Those
The
are creepy dolls anyway.
yeah, it was a creepy doll. My parents actually took one back to the store and exchanged it for another one because they thought it was just some sort of malfunction of the toy.
Right.
And it still happened with the next one. So the elders of the congregation even came to our house on like a shepherding call, and we had to throw out everything that we had and start over and paint the walls and like do all this crazy stuff that I didn't understand why I had to get rid of all my toys.
The elders made you do that?
That was their suggestion, yes. And
All right.
that was their suggestion. Um, was that, we get rid of everything because, my mom went to thrift stores and yard sales a lot. We weren't rich as, growing up.
Yeah.
So the only explanation that they had was that someone had either been practicing like witchcraft or demonic spiritualistic rituals, and something that we had bought from this yard sale or thrift store had been attached by a demon or something. I was young when it happened, but
Sure.
I do remember we have had talks about this, my family and I. And but there's no like haunting or evil energy. You either got angels or demons, and like in the Jehovah's Witness religion, pretty much everything's a demon. So
Yes.
if you're not in the Kingdom Hall and you're, Sunday best with the Bible in your hand, it's demonic. So, but yeah, that was their suggestion, was that we get rid of all these things. That we painted the walls. I mean, a lot of things. My dad got rid of every R-rated movie he had. Just a lot of things that they said could be a channel for these demonic whatever. So the girls at the hall, two of them, their dads were elders. And I remember them asking me about this one time when I was at one of their houses. They were asking me about the demons in my house. And I was just kind of like glad they wanted to talk to me. So I'm telling them this crazy stuff that's happened. And then they turn on me. They're like, oh, well, I don't want to be around you. You scare me. Those stories are scary. And then they went back to their elder fathers, who is probably who they got the information from in the first place.
That's what I was going to say, because they shouldn't have even known that information. That's all supposed to be confidential.
Exactly. And one little girl told her dad that I was telling them about stories of demons and that I wouldn't stop talking about it and that I was scaring her. So they made me go home. And like, I didn't bring it up in conversation. They did. But that's just how the dynamic between me and the other ladies at the Kingdom Hall when I was younger. It was not a good, it wasn't great.
No,
I
it's
would have
very
much
unfair.
rather, yeah, I would have much rather hung out with the guys in our congregation because I did get along with them. But that is inappropriate. You're not allowed to have male friends unless you're trying to marry one of them. And then
Right.
you don't even really get to know each other until after you've married this person. There's no courting. It's almost arranged in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was homeschooled starting in middle school as well.
Was that to get you away
so
from
that made my life
was that to get you away from like worldly influences at school or something, to kind of get
yes.
a tighter grip on you?
Yes. And my parents had also taken custody of my cousin, which is a whole other story, but that's a different chapter. Had taken custody of my male cousin, and he was like a brother to me. We had grown up together at our grandmother's house. We were very close, me and my cousins. My parents had taken custody of him, so he had really, really bad ADHD. Like, he was very hyper. He couldn't pay attention to anything. He had really bad learning disabilities in school. So my mom thought maybe she could take a leave from work and homeschool the both of us. And so that's what she did. So it worked for me. I caught on really quickly. It did not work so well for my cousin. So they let him.
Yeah, that would be tough. I don't know. As a person who's a little bit on the ADHD side myself, self-learning in that kind of environment without structure could be very difficult.
Yes, yeah, and, my mom was still working part-time, so sometimes she would just give us our assignments and say, "Finish these, and we'll go over the answers when you're done." And so, I ended up helping him and teaching him more than my mom did to an extent because we were there together all the time. So,
Yeah.
and I caught on. Um, I'm a pretty bright person. I'm fairly intelligent. I got good grades anyway, so, um, so it was fine, but, it was hard to keep up with my schoolwork and my when my mom had to go back to work. Her and my dad were both working full time, and I'm trying to, take care of my little brother, um, who has his disabilities. And from about the age of 12 until I moved out, that was, my responsibility was to get my little brother his medicine because he had to have special medicine certain times of the day or he would have seizures. um, Put him on the bus, make sure he got off the bus, make sure he had snacks, make sure, he was clean. And then in the summertime, when he was on summer break, he was my responsibility full time.
That's a lot to put on a kid.
Yeah, it is. I don't remember there ever being a time, though, honestly, that I regretted that because I loved my brother and,
Sure.
I would do anything for him. He's like my kid in a lot of ways. So, because we were so close growing up, and then,
Sure.
to take care of him the way that I did, I never regretted any of that, or I never had any resentments towards him, because of that. It made me grow up so fast that I feel like I missed out on
Yeah.
a huge portion of my life, which caught up with me in later years. So, that uh, it was not resentment towards him so much as it was towards my parents because they put me in this situation where they said, "Oh, you're mature enough and you're strong enough and you're smart enough to handle this." Or, we wouldn't give you the responsibility if we didn't think you could handle it. But as a child at
Hmm.
12 years old, it was like, I was in the same house every day. I felt trapped. What do I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
I can't go anywhere. I'm not allowed to sit on my front porch and even talk to the neighbors. Um, I can't go to the girls at the Kingdom Hall and have fun with them. Um, I have nowhere to go.
No,
and,
you're
and
very isolated. Yeah. Very
very
isolated.
isolated. Yes.
So then, I'm just thinking you're living this life, which sounds pretty busy for a 12-year-old. And at that same time, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, that means that you probably had other things you had to do too. So, how did the burden of being one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or privilege as they would see it, how did that impact you, growing up, going to meetings and field service, knocking on doors, studying, all those things that you had to do? Um, how did that fit into your life, or what was your experience with that?
Yeah. As a child, I was excited at first as a young child to go out and in the field service ministry. It was fun. I thought, when I was like from ages 4, 5, 6, uh, I could read at the age of 3, so that was always a good selling point. When my mom was taking me to the doors, I could read really well. So have me read a scripture, and these people would just be like, "Oh, she's the most adorable little thing," Take your magazines, little girl, aren't you
Oh yeah,
cute?
great way to place literature.
Yes, it really was. So, and so, we would rehearse those things, and I liked it. As I got older, though, obviously, I think a lot of people feel this way, even those who are still in the the religion. They kind of you stop looking forward to going out in field service
Sure.
as I became an unbaptized publisher. I started to give the little presentations that the sisters are allowed to give on the stage, or that they used to be allowed to give. I'm not sure how that works anymore. Um, I I wanted to get baptized. I thought that that would fix everything. At the age of 12, I was already being shunned to an extent in my congregation, um, because the girls in my hall had said, that I was too worldly and that I was not like them. So I didn't really have a lot of friends anyway. I was already isolated, and I thought if I get baptized, maybe it'll make some of these expectations easier, and um and people will like me more.
Yeah, it's a way of proving yourself.
Exactly. So I started to study the questions and go over that. And in October of 1996, I believe, I was baptized at a special assembly.
And so,
And
how old were you then?
I had just turned 13.
Gotcha.
I turned 13 in September and I was baptized in October.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, like I said before, I was really good at reading and comprehending. So, of course, I made it sound like uh, I really knew what I was answering in those questions. And when the elders talk to you about your commitment, I really sounded like I was serious about it.
Oh yeah, we all did, because we all
Yeah,
knew we all knew what we needed to do and what we needed to say, in order to make that happen.
exactly. And even if you didn't know exactly what you needed to say, there was somebody that was more than willing to coach you into it, as long as it meant you were signing your name on that dotted line and they could put a star by your name because you were a baptized witness.
That's right. Yeah, they weren't going to let you slide. It is kind of funny that they ever turn anyone away, because they kind of do sometimes, but uh,
Yeah,
eventually they always get everybody in.
yeah, yep, they do. They do. So I got baptized and I started to auxiliary pioneer because I was homeschooled. So when my brother was in school, the bus would come to get him, and then a sister from the Kingdom Hall would come to pick me up and take me out in service with them. So I would go out in service 3 to 4 days a week, and so it gave me something to do. I wasn't stuck in the house all day then, so that
Yeah.
was awesome. It gave me something to do. However, I feel like I probably, in hindsight, in retrospect, used that more as like a social hour because I was just so desperate to have somebody to talk to.
Sure.
And so I didn't really take it serious enough. And there was a brother in the hall at one point that we were at, we always would break at McDonald's. And we were at McDonald's, and earlier in the day, it was him, his wife, another sister, and me in the car. And I was hungry. I was really hungry. And I was like, what time is it? Can we go to McDonald's yet? And I had said something a couple of times about being hungry. And when we got to McDonald's, this brother pulls me aside and says to me, if you're just going out in field service so somebody will buy you a meal at McDonald's, you can't go out with me anymore. So don't ask me and my wife to pick you up for service anymore. Like it was
God.
it was crazy. And I was just like, I told him just to take me home at that point. And uh, my mom was really upset that he would say that to me, and she went to the brothers. I don't know whatever came of it, honestly. I had to really put some thought into remembering this much of my childhood because I have, some PTSD
Sure.
that it's really it, my memory is just I don't have a lot of memories. They're very spotty. I remember circumstances like the atmosphere that I was in, but it's really hard for me to remember specific things. So
Well,
the things
let's talk
telling
talk
how
about
hard.
that then. You talk about that atmosphere. What was, like, what was your feeling? Just what were you feeling as a kid in all this? What was it like for you?
I mean, I was miserable, Mike. Like I said, my whole life was just one. situation after another of me trying to find where I fit in,
Yeah.
trying to find my place. And so that was a really miserable place to be. And at the time when I had got baptized, I was not aware that I was suffering from a disorder that causes you to repress memories from your childhood, from trauma.
Mm.
Uh, and so all of this is starting to come on at the same time, and I'm starting to have flashbacks of these uh, things that happened to me when I was a child that I didn't remember before that point in time.
Mm.
Uh, so I'm miserable, but I don't know how to cope. I don't know anything to do except to just keep going out in field service and keep studying my Bible and keep, at this point, I really was full fledged. Like I really did want to be a spiritual person.
Well,
I
yeah,
wanted
you
to,
had a reason to want to be. Just like you opened this talking about your mom and how she had these traumas, and then this religion comes full circle that comes back to her, and
Mhm.
she sees that as a way to maybe fix her problems. Here you are as a kid with no tools. I mean, what 12, 13-year-old kid has the tools to overcome and cope with all this stuff? And then you think you're going to get baptized, and Jehovah's Holy Spirit's going to rain down like a dove upon you, and it's going to fix all your problems.
I'm gonna feel whole because I'm baptized.
Right, right, of course. And those are the things that they tell you.
Yeah.
They tell you this stuff. That's part of the sales pitch to get you to take that step. So, here you are now, this lonely, depressed, little girl, and you've got trauma coming back, in these flashbacks, and you had every reason to think that, just doubling down on whatever you were doing, quote, spiritually in the organization was going to fix everything. And you desperately probably needed that at the time.
Yeah, and not to mention that the elders, anytime that I would go to them or seek counseling, that's what they told me to do. Throw yourself into it.
Yep.
You need to get more hours, talk to more people, try and start a Bible study, read your Bible more often, be more involved in the theocratic ministry school.
Yep.
Come to do things like clean the kingdom hall and offer to help older sisters at the hall. Like you're selfish and you're not doing enough. So
Yep.
that was my issue. They made me feel like everything that happened to me was my fault
Yep.
and that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
so why not heap that burden on a child? You have somebody who's clearly hurting already, and then tell them you're not good enough because you're not regular in cleaning the kingdom hall or something stupid like that.
yeah,
It's the last thing you needed at that point in your life, I'm sure, was a culture of an organization that just beats people down.
yeah, of course. That's and some people, I think that people, well, people like you and I, we uh we have a resilience about us, but also we weren't falling for their BS like they wanted us to. For a
Right.
little while, yes.
Yeah.
Um, they can only beat you down for so long, and some of us just have to stand up and say, "I'm not going to take this anymore."
Yeah, and
And
honestly, I
like my
think
mom,
go ahead.
go
I
ahead.
know, you go ahead.
For people like my mom who life had already beaten her down so far that it's like that's what she was used to.
Yeah.
So when she came into this cult, she it was almost like a relief for her. Like she could breathe again because she had somebody telling her what to do. She didn't have to think for herself anymore.
Right.
She didn't have to wonder what was going to happen. She was told that if she relied on Jehovah and she prayed and she became spiritually fit, that everything in her life would just come together, and that she doesn't have to worry about those things anymore.
Hmm.
Anything that happens in this life doesn't matter, because as long as you're faithful to Jehovah under every circumstance, you're going to go to paradise. So it doesn't matter who dies. It doesn't matter who abuses you. It doesn't matter what happened in your past. Just pray to Jehovah about it. Just stay faithful, because in paradise, it's all going to be erased. So, I mean, for her, for her, that was enough. She didn't ask questions. For me, it wasn't. It
Yeah.
was, I had questions that couldn't be answered from a very young age. And I tried to suppress those because, of course, I felt I got baptized. So I had the obligation of doing what I was supposed to do as a baptized member of Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I had guilt because the only people I actually have in my life are my parents. I don't have friends. I don't have social activities. I don't have anyone else that I can turn to. My parents are the only people that are even, no matter how abusive or how horrible of an experience I may have had growing up, they're the only consistency I have in my life. So
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want that guilt of being the black sheep of the family.
Sure.
But it is what it is now. But at the time, and then when I was 13, almost 14, I started having these flashbacks. And I was my body went into like shock. I was having seizures from the trauma. Like I don't know what exactly happened. My mom took me to a neurologist. He says that I was entering into puberty at the time, and sometimes that puberty can cause your brain to remember things that you didn't remember from a child. So it can cause you to it unleashes these things,
That
like
makes
all these
sense.
hormones. So I started having seizures, and I tried to sit my mom and dad down one night, tell them, I know I haven't told you this before now, but I'm starting to remember things, Mom, about your brother, about my uncle. Um, he touched me when I was little, and I was explaining to her specific instances of times when I was at my grandmother's house or when I was at my uncle's house spending the night with my cousins around the age of 4 or 5, where he would, one by one, come into the bedroom and take us out. And then when one came back, sometimes it would just be one that night. Sometimes it would be all of us, but one by one. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I
Yeah.
did with my mom. I did tell her specific things that happened, and she sends me to my room, talks to my dad, calls me back down and says, mind you, let me say this. My uncle was in prison at the time that I'm telling my mom this
Mm-hmm.
for molesting his own daughters and his stepdaughter. For a long time, I didn't know why he had gone to prison. Nobody would tell me because I was a kid and I didn't need to know. They just said he did a bad thing and he had to go pay the consequences for his actions.
Right. And these were the same two little girls that he molested were the same two little girls that you were spending the night with, correct?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. Gotcha.
yeah. Um, so my mom tells me that she thinks I'm just lying, that I just want attention, and that she's going to take me to the elders. We're going to talk about this so I can get some spiritual counseling.
Mm. Let
The
me
elder,
before you get to that, I don't mean to interrupt, but
it's okay.
do you think you said that your mom had trauma in her past? Um do you think that her brother could have been part of that trauma, and that maybe she was just trying, this was a way to, because she couldn't accept it herself and she had to distance herself from it, by any means possible, even if that's invalidating you?
That's a really, really good question. I can't give you a straight yes or no on that because I really don't know, but it's
Yeah.
very probable. I do know that my mother as a child endured abuse.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure who. It was family members, I know, but
Yeah.
I was always under the impression that it was older members of the family that they had been left with as a children. Uh, and
And often that's how the cycle gets passed down.
Exactly.
Right. I
And
just
so
I just wondered if he
yeah,
if he
it
could have
could be,
been.
but the most of what my mom endured was my older brothers were abused by a woman that my mom or a man that my mom was dating.
Gotcha.
And I don't know the extent of that abuse either. However, I do know that it really hurt my mom because she was just trying to do what was right. She was working, two jobs, and she had left my brothers with this man who she trusted, who she loved, who she thought would not hurt her
Right.
or her children. And come to find out, he did hurt my brothers badly. And so my mom, I don't think she's ever forgiven herself for that.
Yeah.
So for me to come to her and say, hey, this happened, I think she was just so, it probably brought back trauma from her as well as how helpless she felt as a mother to my brothers when that happened.
Yeah.
So for her to have to feel that helplessness again, or to feel like she failed her child, I just don't think she could accept it. Like,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
it didn't make sense when I was a kid, though. It
No,
didn't
God, no. It's
be told that I was lying, or just be told that I just wanted attention.
yeah.
Oh, and we asked your uncle, and he said he never did that. So why? I mean, he wouldn't lie about it. Oh,
Oh
okay.
God.
Okay. Like, this is what I was told. Like, pretty much
Right.
verbatim, I
Right.
was told lying because he says it didn't happen. And the elders, the elders make me go through every gruesome detail of what happened. Like, my mom couldn't tell them, I had to. For them to just tell me that, okay, my cousins were there when it happened, but since they weren't in the room with us, he took us back one by one. And so since they weren't in the room with us, they didn't see it with their own eyes happen to me. That's not good enough.
Really?
Yeah. And they weren't witnesses. They were living in Pekin, Indiana with their mother. And so by this point in time, they were living with their mom. And they weren't baptized witnesses, so they weren't credible anyway,
Right.
because they were worldly. And so the brothers put me on reproof.
They put you on reproof?
Yes, they did.
For what? Lying or something?
I guess because I was making this big story up,
Oh God.
and it was private reproof at the time, which later turned into public reproof because I had been writing letters back and forth to a boy from the Georgetown congregation, and our letters were a little more racy than they should have been. So then it was public reproof shortly thereafter.
Oh God.
Yeah.
So the snowball just builds and rolls downhill, and it just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, like from one like point in my life to the next, no matter where I turn, I'm being rejected. I'm being told that I'm not a good kid. I'm being told that I'm not a good Jehovah's Witness. I'm being told that I'm a liar, that I want attention, that I'm just that there's something wrong with me. That there's something wrong with me. That what is happening to me is my fault because I've done something wrong to either deserve the way I've been treated, or because I'm lying, about it. That's why I have all of this emotional pain, and this is why I can't get over, this hump and be more spiritual. It's because I'm not being truthful, and that I'm not, those kind of things. So
Yeah,
I'm just,
yeah.
everything is my fault.
Of
In my,
course. It can't
and
just be that you're a very hurt person. It can't be that. There can't be any modicum of compassion. It has to be you're a piece of shit, and you did it to yourself.
yeah,
It's so
yeah.
awful.
It is. It is awful, and it throws me into a victim stance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
From that point on, from an early point, but even today, still, I have issues with like playing the victim. Does that make sense?
Oh well, yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't even mean to. I don't even realize I'm doing it sometimes. If it hadn't been for therapy and for other programs that I've been in to help me heal from this stuff, I don't even know I'm doing it. But
Wait,
sometimes it's just
you mean to tell me that programs outside of Jehovah's Witnesses have helped you, but Jehovah's Witnesses didn't? It's that dynamic. Jehovah's Witnesses act like their religion or the Bible or whatever will cure all your ills, but isn't it funny how for most of us that managed to get out, it's the fact that we went to quote worldly, through programs or to therapists or whatever. It's those people that actually helped us. It's not quote, the truth, the religion, or, the Bible itself, even necessarily. It's these outside people that show basic human compassion and humanity that help us to get through these traumas and, to get better. It's not usually a byproduct of escaping into a religion.
Our whole life, this religion, these principles of the Bible and the religion are supposed to be what saves us from whatever ails us, and how it's funny that they are so against us turning to any worldly therapy or any other sort of medium to help with our issues.
Yep.
Yet those are the people who helped us the most.
Yep,
or,
absolutely.
And I think what I never felt one iota of compassion from the elders that pretty much raised me. Never once did I feel like they were truly on my side,
That's horrible. They're supposed to be loving shepherds, looking for lost sheep and carrying, they always had these pictures in the magazines of a shepherd holding a little lamb or whatever, but, in a caring way. But, so often when people go to the elders in the congregation for help for truly devastating problems, I think it just gets back to what you said a minute ago, and that is they pretty much just point it back at you and say it's your fault.
Yeah. Is that in like the Shepherding the Flock book? Deflect.
Yeah.
There's a chapter on that. Like, is there a chapter on how to make us feel like little shit?
Oh man, I don't know, but I'll tell you, I think that I do think that on some level it takes a certain personality to climb the ladder of Jehovah's Witnesses to even become an elder sometimes. And I'm not indicting all elders as stone-faced, compassionateless monsters.
No.
But there are certainly a lot.
The vast majority of them.
Yeah, there are a lot.
I got into, as I got older, and then I could drive, my life was a little bit easier, I guess. And I switched halls. I ended up meeting a guy, and I married him, to be honest with you, just to get out of my parents' house.
Sure.
And
can't blame you.
The congregation that he went to, there were some really nice people there. You know what I mean? It's the organization that's crooked. It's the organization. Sure. And the rules and the policies that they set down. And I don't think that all of these elders are I don't think they even know how really like screwed up they are.
No, you know what I mean? I don't think none of us knew.
No,
they're
just doing what they've been brainwashed to do, just like we did. Yeah. They're doing what they've been indoctrinated to do. Yep. And they're being like puffed up, like, because it's some big responsibility to shepherd the flock. And so you're doing God's will. You're doing what God told you to do when and I guess there's just not much room for compassion and love when on the business end of that. And that's what most of them look at it as. It's just, I don't know.
It's rules and regulations.
Yeah. And that's it. Yep. And like that, I know I listened to your podcast, and that rank and file, so first of all, I'm a kid, and second, I'm female, and third, I've already been on reproof. So there's like no room for compassion for somebody like me, because I'm not any of the things that you need to be to warrant even an ounce of respect from an elder. So it just, I don't know, as a kid, it really, it made me feel so unimportant.
Yeah. And it's got to be hard to have self-respect I know it was for me in such an environment, where you're so invalidated all the time.
I have no respect for myself either. I get it. Yeah.
So then, Is the next step in your life then pretty much, getting married to this person, or?
Um, yeah, a few years in between there, I still struggled with my identity, with um, making meetings, and I was depressed. There was a point in time I developed an eating disorder, uh, and I got really, really skinny. And we were on vacation one year, my family and my dad busted in on me in the bathroom when I was throwing up what we had eaten. And so um, they put me in the hospital. So I was in uh, a mental hospital here for a little while. Uh, and when I came out of there is when I decided, okay, I'm gonna turn over a new leaf. I'm really gonna give it my all this time with the organization, and I'm not gonna go dressed in black and shave my head, and because these are things I had done. Like I would go to the Kingdom Hall in all black, head to toe. I had cut all my hair off. My hair was really long. I had cut it all off. I had colored it orange. I had colored it black. Any sort of expression that I could get away with, I was doing it. So,
I think
um,
it sounds like you were kind of trying to find yourself, or just have a little
yeah,
control over your life,
yeah,
in
yeah,
a life where you've had so little control and been trapped by so many things. Just coloring your hair different, hey, it's something you can control, just like, honestly, the eating disorder. Those are usually about control.
yeah, exactly. And also a part of that was, well, you know what? If people are going to treat me like shit anyway, I'm going to do what
Yeah.
I want to. I don't have friends here. I don't have anybody to impress here. So I'm going to come dressed in all black and wear black makeup and color my hair and shave my head or do what I want because it's not like anybody cares,
Yeah. Yep.
If they cared, they would take time out to talk to me.
Yeah.
So since you're going to treat me like an outcast, I'm going to just go ahead and be one.
Sure.
And yeah, it did have a lot to do with control and and the lack of control I had in my life and making any decisions for myself. So I try to get over that. They put me on like all these psych meds, and for 30 days I was in this hospital in a glass room, so that every time that I ate, they would make me sit in the middle of the floor for an hour after I ate to make sure that I wasn't going to go throw it up. Um, and so I did that for like 30 days, every single day.
Shoot.
And I was on so much medicine that I could not, like I literally could not see straight. I was seeing double because I was on so much medicine. And all I wanted to do was sleep. So I come home with these medications and I just feel like a zombie. Like I don't remember a whole lot of that part of my life. So I start slowly weaning off of the medications and going back to meetings and trying to branch out and find a group of young individuals that I can get along with, that I can fit in with, which is where I met my first husband. And they were cool. They were skaters. They listened to rock music. They got together on the weekends and had chaperone parties where we all had fun. And, it was like I actually started to feel like I belonged with them because they didn't judge me.
Yeah.
But they were like those walk the line witnesses,
Oh yeah.
like
There's a lot of
they
those.
yeah, they were doing absolutely everything that they could without getting disfellowshipped.
Yes, right up to the line.
Yeah, exactly. Like toes dangling off the edge. So I was like, these are my kind of people. I could be a witness if I can do it like this. So
Yeah.
So, it was nice to finally have a place where I felt happy. And this guy, he had taken interest in me and we had talked a lot. And to be honest with you, I really wasn't in love with him. Um, I was in love with the boy from my congregation that I had tried to date for a long time. And it just didn't work out because we were both so like mentally screwed up from this indoctrination. We were both so, crazy. Like, we had no clue who we were really
Sure.
at the time, but he, he ended up, he ended up calling me 3 days before my wedding to this guy. And my parents had already paid for everything, for me to get married. They paid for the trip.
Oh yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I
as
cared about guy I was marrying, and he
Yeah.
had proven himself that he cared about me unconditionally. Okay, he
Right.
put no conditions on our relationship, and I needed to get out of my parents' house. So the guy called me, and it was like the hardest thing I've ever had to do to say no. Like I'm kind of already scheduled to marry this other guy. Like, sorry.
Yeah, and as a witness, they view an engagement um, almost as though you are married. So,
Exactly.
like an engagement is a promise, and if you break
Oh
off
yeah.
an engagement, you can get in trouble for that. So,
Yeah, and especially if I were to break it off to go with this other kid
oh yeah.
who's on reproof in the hall and not making. And I'm really at this point. This is my last ditch effort. I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna give up on this religion. I'm not gonna give up because my mom and dad, like, I had been threatened with being disfellowshipped so many times, excommunicated, so many times as a teenager, because of my actions that they didn't like. So I'm scared to death that I'm gonna get disfellowshipped, and the only family that I have, the only people that have ever been consistent in my life, will have to shun me. And
Yeah.
so I'm just I'm doing anything I can at this point to stay on their good side because I didn't want to lose my mom and dad and my brother.
Right.
So I get married and I move to Cincinnati, and our marriage like pretty much falls apart before it ever starts. We got into some very immoral things. We were drinking all of the time, smoking weed. Um, he would drink. He would just be drunk all the time. And he wasn't like an abusive drunk or anything. He was a happy drunk, but he was sloppy, and we argued a lot, and we had no clue how to be adults or how to be married, or it was just.
Typical witness kids getting married.
Yeah, exactly. Like, uh, that's one thing I did like every other witness kid.
Yeah, we were all so clueless at that point.
Yeah, well, we didn't know how to be anything. Like, I did not know how to be an adult. Okay,
Sure.
I didn't know what politics were. I didn't know. Um, I never had to pay attention to how many taxes they were taking out of my paycheck, or balancing a checkbook, or paying bills, or like, I was never taught life skills. I was
Yeah.
homeschooled on top of that, so I didn't have any idea how to socially interact with people who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, and
Uh,
because the as you mentioned before, the marriage is as Jehovah's Witnesses almost on some level feel arranged, and there's such a lack of the ability to really get to know another person
yeah,
in their chaperoned courtship arrangement. Then you end up marrying somebody and finding out, oh look, he can't stop drinking, and he's doing other things, and
exactly.
those
Yeah,
were things you could have known, other than for the arrangement that Jehovah's Witnesses use as far as dating goes.
exactly. Yes. So I don't. I still feel guilty about that because honestly, he was not a bad person. He was not a bad guy. We just weren't right for each other.
Sure.
I didn't try very hard to make it work though. Once we moved, I really honestly, I can be honest in saying this now, and I'm not saying it in like a. I'm not trying to say it in like a bragging way, but I really just married him to get out of my parents' house. And I thought that's what you were supposed to do when you came to a certain age. 3 days after I turned 18, we got married.
Sure. Yeah. That
Uh,
happens a lot.
yeah. And so I just we tried to make it work for a little while, but we both started seeing someone else. And uh the only reason I didn't get disfellowshipped because of our divorce is because we were both inactive at the time, and because he had committed adultery. He had been with someone else and had admitted to it.
Mm,
And
gotcha.
so I didn't get disfellowshipped for that. And I'm already considered. I'm hiding. I'm ducking and dodging the elders after this. Like, I'm not living in Louisville anymore, so I don't have to worry about facing the same people that were in my congregation. So I can go to a new congregation now and start anew, and they don't even have to know about all this stuff, right? Like,
Right.
and I'm not thinking, well, they're going to send my publisher's card.
With all the private notes about you.
Yeah. So then they got all the dirt on me, right? But these brothers, They were like, you know what we're going to do? Since you've been inactive for a little while and you're coming to us and we think you're truly repentant for everything that's happened, we're going to let you start over. Like, we're not going to put you on reproof. Now, we want you to study with a sister here, and we're just going to treat you like a study and move you back up. So you can't answer any questions right away, but, if you come to meetings consistently, you can start answering questions again, and, we'll worry about all that stuff as it comes. We'll let you progress back up. So I thought, this is it. This is my chance, right?
Yeah, that was actually somewhat kind of them.
Yeah, it was. But
Yeah.
these were in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Gotcha.
And I had started smoking cigarettes at this point. And so I was not willing to give up smoking. I mean, I tried, but it's a very, very hard addiction to quit.
Oh, yes, very much.
And they thought I should just be able to pray it away, like you can just stop smoking. So then I had been called into a meeting with those elders a couple of times, and they were like, if you can't quit smoking, we can't help you. So I just stopped going again, right? Like, I run from the problem because that's the best way for me to handle it at the time.
Right. Those were the tools you had.
Exactly. I didn't know how to try to work this out or anything. So I stopped going again, and I'm still making the memorial. My mom's like, oh, no, you're not making your other meetings, but you have to make the memorial. And so I do it to make her happy.
Sure.
And I met another guy and had my first son with this man. And my picker was broken because this man was very emotionally abusive to me and controlling. And so it was very fitting for me to be with someone who was getting control every aspect of my life, since that's how I was.
Yep.
And I went through a string of bad decisions with him. And I started drinking and using drugs after my son was born. I was using cocaine and ecstasy, and pretty much anything else that was offered to me at the time, I would do it.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. I didn't want to have to. I was always looking for an escape, always.
Of course. Of course, because nothing to this point has ever been dealt with.
Yeah, exactly. And not only has it not been dealt with, but up until this point in my life, I've never felt like I belonged anywhere.
Sure.
And that's a deep emotional pain, because as humans, it's in our nature, like, to want to have that herd mentality. You want to fit somewhere.
Right.
You want to go somewhere where you feel safe, and I never have. So I didn't delve into my addiction at that point, but later on in my life, I did develop a very almost deadly addiction to drugs. I tried to fill that void with men, with getting that attention, from a man to validate me. It would work for a little while, but then once reality set in and the newness wore off and he wasn't in love with me anymore, I would just drop him and go on to somebody else who was going to worship me for a little while.
Yeah.
It's really sad. I owed a lot of people amends when I got
Well, there's a high that comes with all that too. So.
Well, there is, yeah, because for the first time I felt like adored and respected, and to an extent anyway, even if it was just like a physical validation, it was validation, and I craved that. So,
sure.
Things progressed. My mom and dad didn't really shun me. They knew I wasn't doing the right thing, but they were always, trying to tell me. My dad was not a baptized witness or anything, but he would always tell me, "Oh, do what your mother says, and your mother's right, and you need to go back to the hall." And kind of, he would like. Eventually, he got to the point where he agreed with my mom, and I guess he finally decided, or they decided together, that they did love each other and it was worth fighting through for their marriage. And they got to a place where my dad wouldn't go to the hall, but he didn't oppose my mother going anymore.
Gotcha.
He would help my mom get my little brother ready, or help her cook dinner, or make sure that we were being quiet while my mom was doing her Bible study or whatever. So he got to a point where he was more supportive, but by that point I was already too far gone. Like it didn't, it didn't really affect me that much. That and then I just thought it was hypocritical of him. Like, how are you going to tell me to do this when you don't do it? And you can tell that I don't want to do it, but you're going to make me go anyway. I
Yeah.
didn't
Suddenly
take
you
the
care
couch a
to
lot
do
of course
this.
with you, Dad. Like, I don't want to go either.
So then, how did this? So you're not disfellowshipped or anything. Um, you're just you're living this life. Sounds like you're in addiction at this point.
Yeah.
How did that play out? As far as from there on, because that honestly, with all the trauma and not just that most people will see trauma as obviously what happened to you when you were a little kid from your uncle, but trauma has just been the name of the game throughout your life as you're going through you know um, this whole life as a witness. And then now you've got, I'm sure there are negative consequences and traumas as a result of the drugs and everything else. I'm honestly, you're probably very fortunate that you didn't destroy yourself. That speaks to your spirit. So how did that transform over time?
Well, like I said, I went from just dabbling in different drugs, and then I did quit for a little while. I went to school to get my cosmetology license. I got my cosmetology license, and was happy for a very short period of time. Um, Thought that getting married to my first son's dad would fix everything. It just made it worse. So when I moved out, I finally left him one day. I just packed my stuff while he was at work and I ran. And I felt really guilty because I left my son with him for a period of time. Uh, but I had to do what I had to do to get away from him.
Mm-hmm.
I was desperate at that point to just get away from him because I could not endure the abuse any longer. I was really sick. I had developed a stomach disease, a rare stomach condition called gastroparesis, and I had had 7 surgeries in a 2-year period and was on pain medicine, just one prescription after the other. And so I'm getting a prescription every month from my doctor, thinking that I need it because I'm in pain, not realizing that when I run out, I'm not so sick because of my disease. I'm sick because I'm going through withdrawal because I'm now addicted to these opiates. Um, I didn't know what addiction was. My family never really had that dare talk with me. We never really talked about that kind of stuff because they never expected that of me being raised as a witness. That was immoral and it was worldly, and they never expected me to dive into that. So we never had that talk about drugs and how they can ruin your life. Even if they had, I'm not sure it would have made a difference because I was just taking the medicine that the doctor prescribed me and not realizing that I've got this physical addiction that has grown inside of me.
Yeah.
So I get cut off from the doctor because, I'm trying to refill my medication too early, like 3 months in a row. And I start. And so, if all the trauma that happened when I was younger wasn't enough, I'm traumatizing myself over and over again every day with this addiction.
Yeah.
And with, I was homeless for a little while, just on people's couches. And then my addiction really took off when I was about 27. And I had met another guy and had another son. And the crazy thing about this is one thing I'm really grateful for through all of this is that I never had any hardcore addictions when I was pregnant with my kids. So I didn't have to worry about my children being born addicted to drugs. I can't imagine what a woman goes through when she has that problem. And I used to be really judgmental, thinking, how could you do drugs when you're pregnant with your baby? You don't care about your baby. That's not the truth. Addiction is a monster. Yeah. Addiction will take everything from you and make you feel like it's everybody else's fault that your life is in shambles. It's hard to take that power back, but just miraculously somehow, I ended up not being on any hard drugs or anything when I was pregnant with my kids. So they were born healthy and they're very smart, sweet, intelligent children. Unfortunately, the cycle continued with them because, through my addiction and through the trauma that I had never dealt with, my children ended up going through trauma. They ended up living a sick life because I was sick. And
Hmm.
so it was a ripple effect. I wasn't there for my children emotionally. I would leave my kids for days at a time with my parents and go off to use drugs and be just laid up in an abandoned house somewhere high for days. I have no clue what actually happened to me some of those days. I don't know the people that I was around. You're right. I'm really, really, really fortunate to have come through that as unscathed as I did. Um, it's not it's not a place when I was that 13-year-old girl getting baptized that I ever imagined my life would be in, because I thought that the religion was going to fix all of these issues I was having. And I thought that these people would help me get over what I had experienced and make me a better person. And that's just not the case, you know? uh, it's not what happened.
Yeah,
Um,
turns out Jehovah has limitations.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, so throughout all of this progressing, my addiction went from prescription pills and alcohol to heroin. And I had started, I wasn't using intravenously at first for the first couple of years, but it developed into an IV drug use situation. And I'll leave out a lot of those details just because it's it's too much to get into, really.
Sure, that's
Let's
fine.
I had okay, so by this time I had left my middle son's dad. Um, I had a string of men who, when I actually did commit myself to a man, he would always cheat on me. He would always either leave me for someone else, or he would stay with me because I worked, I cooked, I cleaned, I took care of the kids. Um, a lot of the guys in my life didn't really have any responsibility. I took all that responsibility on because I wanted to fix someone, and I was so desperate for somebody to love me,
Mhm.
and to care about me, that I was willing to go to any lengths to make that happen. So I would say, no, 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 you don't have to go to work. I'll work two jobs. No, let me cook for you. Let me take care of your baby. Let me do the housework, thinking, oh, they're going to have so much admiration and love for me that they won't be able to leave me, because who are they ever going to find that's going to treat them better than I do? So,
Do
like,
you
I'm
do you think that in any way it's I guess I'm a little bit of a workaholic myself, and I kind of attribute a lot of that to growing up a witness. As a witness, you are a people pleaser, or you're
Yeah,
kind of taught to be.
yeah,
And we always had so much to do as witnesses that there wasn't really time to just sit down and just be. You are always doing something. It's the difference between a human being and a human doing. You know, we were human doings. We were always busy going here and going out in service or going to this meeting or studying
yeah,
this. And then you, from what you said, also had this family element where you were taking care of your younger brother and you were helping your cousin in the homeschooling while trying to kind of do the homeschooling yourself, and in addition to all these other witness activities. So do you feel that I'm just it just kind of struck me, do you feel that some of these relationships, not only was it just you know desperation for attention, for love, for validation, but also um, kind of an innate need or something that has been developed in you to just keep doing something always?
well, yeah, I still have that issue. I'm very ADHD, so I'm always fidgeting. Like, as we're
Yeah.
talking right now, my hands are moving. Uh, I'm uncrossing and crossing my legs. I can't sit still.
I understand.
Uh, it's busy work. You get
Yeah.
so ingrained in doing that busy work when you're a part of the organization, because they keep you doing that so that your mind is focused on what they want it to be focused on. So
Yeah.
you're not focusing on any doubts you may have, or you're not really able to look at the big picture because you're so busy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, I definitely think that that probably did have something to do with it. Um, I'm not sure that I ever really looked at that perspective of it, because I've always been stuck on this. You know, I had always been stuck on trying to get attention from someone, or validation, or that
Yeah.
love. So, but that you make a really good point there, that um, always, it's something that I just don't know how to not do. I don't know how to sit still. I don't know how to uh, not do that busy work, I
Yeah,
guess.
I have two speeds, and that's on and off.
Yeah.
And either sometimes I can sit there and just kind of go numb in front of the TV. I like the TV, honestly, and personally I like to
Yeah.
watch reruns of shows because I don't have to pay attention to them and I can just turn my brain off. It's pretty much the only way I can.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just constantly going. But even every human being needs to shut down at some point. So that's how I do it. But um, I just it's something that I've been realizing myself, and then just hearing your experience here, it just made me wonder if you thought that might play into it as well. Obviously, there's lots of things that play, in our humanity, but
Yeah.
it seems to have quite an impact on us. The whole experience of being a witness, not to mention all of the other stuff that you had to deal with and face.
Well, yeah, yeah, it definitely makes an impact. The whole My whole life was just kind of a recipe for disaster to an extent, as far as my drug use goes and how far down I went before I hit bottom with that.
Yeah,
So even though I find healthy ways now to keep myself busy and I find healthy ways to, I guess, decompress, uh, it's still something that I don't know that I'll ever be able to get rid of. That that feeling of
yeah,
because when you're a witness, when you're in the truth, quote unquote, you don't you feel guilty if you have downtime because that means you could be spending either in Bible study, in field service, at the Kingdom Hall, studying more in depth for next week's Watchtower Bible study or whatever. Like so, you feel guilty if you take time to yourself. There's no allowance for you
absolutely.
to know you or for you to enjoy you. There's no allowance for that. So I still feel that way now as a mother, as a wife. And a lot of times I'll get this attitude and say, I don't ever have time for me. I don't ever get to slow down. Well, I don't make time for me. I don't make time to slow down. So really, I can't put anybody else.
Oh boy, that's hitting home right now.
Like I have to make that time, and I just don't because I end up like something in the back of my mind says that I'm not allowed. Something tells me I'm not allowed.
I recently listened to a podcast. There's a book by a lady named Gretchen Rubin, and the book is entitled The Four Tendencies. And the book has to do, from what I could gather, with how humans respond to outside expectations. And there were four different tendencies, four categories. It was like upholder, questioner, rebel, or obliger. And when she was going through them, the first thing I thought is, oh, I'm a questioner. I've questioned a lot of things in my life that helped me to leave this organization behind, that helped me leave this cult, that helped me to challenge my own perceptions on a lot of things and to find a healthier, freer life.
Yeah.
But as she was talking about them, and I believe there was a test that you could take on her website. Um, it was very apparent to me that actually, at my core, and everyone has some of all these qualities, but I am an
Mhm.
obliger. I am very much a person that if I feel that there is an outside expectation of me to do something, I will absolutely do it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, and
and
go above and beyond in doing
go above
it.
and beyond in doing it. Obligers tend to make excellent people in, well, service industries like I work in, because customers are going to love you. You're going to do anything for them.
Oh yeah,
But obligers tend to end up uh, leaving themselves out of the equation.
yeah, and
And
that can make for very bitter, resentful
yeah,
conversations with yourself.
it can, and I really think, I think that on some level, I was naturally wired that way. Again, we all have parts of these qualities, but I wonder how much our upbringing as witnesses. I almost wish I could take some sort of a survey of And heck, I don't know. Maybe I'll put up a survey on the
There
website
you
or
go.
something. I'll have to think about that. But I wonder how many other people who might be listening to this who are ex-witnesses would also kind of tick the box of being an obliger, and I think that has to do with growing up in an organization that was so authoritarian and that absolutely made us that way. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, in an organization that if you like you're not allowed to have free thought
yeah,
um
it's
or
always
be
about
selfish in
them.
it.
It's not about
It's all
you. It's all
exact-
about them.
it's all about them, and it's all about um their name. They
Hmm.
want that gold star by their name.
Yep, and you have to get it for them.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you don't, then you're out, buddy. You're
Yep,
booted.
yep,
So, uh yeah, we were never allowed for it to be about us.
right.
We didn't have birthdays, we didn't have celebrations where we were uh special. We weren't told that we were special in
Oh
any way.
no, we were good for nothing slaves of Jehovah, just as Paul was.
Yeah. So why would we ever think that it was about anything other than them or
Yep,
quote unquote Jehovah?
yep.
Uh, it's just waking up to this has been life changing and heartbreaking and freeing all at the same time.
Yeah.
It almost makes you, or me personally, it almost makes me feel like, how could I be so stupid? How could I be so, you know what I mean? To think that even though I had questions about it my whole life, I've had questions about the people, okay? But my mom always told me, you don't serve the man, you serve God. You serve Jehovah. You
Right.
do these things because of Jehovah. And the organization and the religion has good bones, and that there's people in the organization that aren't going to be good people because we're all imperfect. But it's not up to us to serve man, we serve Jehovah. So my whole life, I've gone through this every phase of my life where I've done really effed up things. And when I come back around, when I come down, I've got that guilt still in the back of my head about um, the truth. This is the truth, and how can I turn my back on it? And I know what I need to do. And I've been told my whole life that all of this bad shit that's happened to you is happening to you because you aren't serving Jehovah. And if
Hmm.
you would just serve Jehovah and get back into the congregation, your life would be fine. Jehovah would bless you if you were doing what you were supposed to do, but we're not going to help you because you're not doing something. It's all your fault. It's your fault. It's your fault. That's all there is to it.
Yep.
So my whole life, I think about all these times that I finally thought I was going to break away from the religion, but I did it in the wrong way. I did it through, through promiscuity and through drug abuse and through running. I was scared to. I didn't know who I was, so I didn't know how to break away and just be me.
Yeah.
So I think about all these times, like, how could I really have thought? I never thought to look deeper. It wasn't until I started listening, when I connected with you on Facebook and started listening to your podcast, and then I started listening to JT and Lady C.
Yep.
And this is a man who was in Bethel, okay? This is a man who would have been like royalty to us in our congregation. And he, he's not bashing. He's not bashing. He's not he's not speaking out of some sort of resentment. He's not being vile about it. He's speaking from his heart about this organization and why he just could not go on. And you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because it's crooked. But he's not trying to convert anybody else. He just has a simple discussion, just like you. You told your story.
Yep.
You didn't lump anybody into a category of everybody is this way and this is bad and you need to leave right now. You told your story, and you changed my perspective, and you opened my eyes so that I could question, so that I didn't feel like I was the only one who was questioning these things.
Yes. Isn't
And
that's such an insidious thing? The way they make us all feel alone because we can't talk about it.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so once I realized I wasn't alone and I could do some research for myself, and that I I could ask questions because I wasn't the first one to ask those questions. And that like apostates were a real thing, but it was certain death if you ever talked to an apostate or looked at an apostate website.
Oh yeah.
So um but yeah, it was really that turning point in my life just came in like the last year, because when I got clean and sober in 2014, where do you think I went?
Back to the Kingdom Hall.
Yes, exactly. I went back to the hall. I started attending meetings. I went to the brothers and I confessed all my sins and I showed repentance and I taught. And that brother, there was one brother, and I have to say, this brother, I will always love him and I will always have respect for him, because not once did he ever look at me as anything other than a person. He didn't look at me as a baptized sister. He didn't look at me as a drug addict. He didn't look at me as somebody who had children out of wedlock. He didn't look at me as somebody who's been homeless. He looked at me as a person. And to this day, this brother has still sent me text messages, or if he sees me in public, he won't shun me. He refuses to.
Wow.
And that means so much to me, because it gave me hope, like a glimmer of hope. And I really want to go to him sometime and like text him the link to your podcast or text him the link to like JT and Lady C's YouTube just to see what would happen, because you can tell that he's an elder. He has a reputation to uphold for that congregation. However, he's not going to let them take his humanity.
Yeah.
And so I have mad respect for that elder.
To be honest, it's the people who don't allow their humanity to be taken are often the people who leave. So
yeah, and
there's still hope.
There is hope, but I don't want to be the one. I've really thought about, hey, here's the information. It's right in front of you. Take it or leave it. Do what you want with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's right. It's like I'm ambivalent about it.
No, I understand, because it's you don't want to destroy somebody's life that they have if they're happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I totally get that, and look, my podcast, Ray Franz's book, Crisis of Conscience, JT and Lady C, John Cedars, like all these, there is so much information out there. And I mean, I know I'm leaving out so many people who are out there that are, producing different content.
The vast apostate army.
Vast apostate army. Yep. Apostate chick. There are all these people who are putting things out there that, in their own voice. And, sometimes, one person's voice. I remember when I first came out, I didn't like Lloyd Evans's stuff. I found it, JW Survey, it was too strong for me. I just wasn't, I wasn't ready to handle the directness of some of that information. I just couldn't look at it that dead on at the time. And I needed something else. And there were other things.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
somebody lead you in a little more gently.
yeah, I definitely needed it a little more gently, because it was very hard to look at all this stuff. It was terrifying and very difficult. And, so many people who are listening, I'm sure, have been through that process. So this elder, this guy that you have this, respect for, if he's looking, he'll find it. And if he's really open, and if he's not, then he won't. And, it's his life.
Yeah, exactly.
It's his life.
Yeah, it is. That's why I figured, I have this issue with, like, I really want to do that, but at the same time, I don't. Because at one point in time, if someone had tried to show me those things, I would have been like most of the witnesses are, and dismissed it and been really upset. It was something I had to come to on my own.
Oh, I would have dug in further. I would have said, not only am I not going to listen to whatever this is, I'm going to, double down on being a witness, because now I'm scared. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But okay, so your podcast was the first thing I ever listened to that was anti-JW. Now, I had heard things before and had conversations with people about, even as an inactive non-member of Jehovah's Witnesses, about, oh, I'm not in the religion, but I would never bring reproach upon Jehovah's name,
Right.
and this is what they really believe, and like still trying to witness to people, even though in my heart I know I don't believe it, but I feel like I'm afraid if that comes out of my mouth, if that disbelief, if those questions come out of my mouth, I'm automatically like I'm gonna be zapped off the earth immediately.
Oh,
Like, you know
believe
what
me, to this day, and I'll say it, I'm an atheist at this point, but to this day, if I say something, and if you listen to my here on the Shunned podcast, I do occasionally say things. I'll joke about something or whatever,
Yeah.
and it still pings in the back of my head. Oh, you're bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. He's gonna kill you, and it's like, you know
Yeah.
what?
That cognitive, we can't rewire ourselves.
No,
You know?
it doesn't go away. Well, I don't know. I've only been out 2.5 years or less. Maybe eventually it will go away. That sounds nice as well, but it also kind of just points to how much, like, let's just break this down. What was it that we were really being ruled by? It wasn't this loving God. It wasn't out of love for neighbor, any of that. It was fear. It was fear that that there's this authority figure in the sky that if we don't do everything just right is going to kill us.
Yeah.
Like,
we will cease to exist, and there's no afterlife. You're just gonna
right.
You're gonna be gone. You're gonna have no happiness. You have nothing.
Right. Jehovah's Witnesses would always talk about, in the Bible, it talks about the fear of God being a motivation. And they would always say that it's not a fear of...
It's a healthy fear.
Yeah, it's a healthy fear. Oh my God, yes. It's a healthy fear.
Jehovah.
Yep, a healthy fear of displeasing him. Just like, well, you don't want to displease your parents, right? Well, I mean, nobody wants to displease their parents. Everyone wants to respect and love their parents. But if just being you displeases them and they are going to kill you for it, then that's not healthy.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's like being in an abusive relationship. That's like being abused as a child. You get, and it's not a healthy fear of displeasing, because if a loving and forgiving God, if you displease that loving and forgiving God and you're imperfect and he knows you're imperfect, then why would you have to be so scared that he's going to smite you? That you are going to cease to exist because you made a mistake.
Right.
You made a human error. So it never made sense to me either. But I don't think I'll ever fully get rid of that fear. And I'll tell you what, in the last year, I've had more times where I have had these deep, like, irrational thoughts in my head of, what if this really is the truth? No. What if I am an apostate now and I'm speaking out against it and it turns out to be true? What's going to happen to me? Like, I can't get it out of my head.
No, I still have it.
Indoctrinated that I just can't. It's a fear that I don't think ever will go away. Maybe it will years down the road. I hope that maybe I can help some people to kind of see the light, so to speak, and to help them if they want out and they don't have a way out. Like, and maybe that will be therapeutic in a way. I hope that for you, Mike.
Oh, it is therapeutic. I can 100% say that it's very therapeutic, and I think that honestly doing this podcast does help me too, because we all need it. Every one of us that left this still has those things in the back of our head that ping us at times, leftover indoctrination, and it helps to be able to talk about it and to help others and things like that. So and every Shunned podcast that I listen to, they're telling a piece of my story. There's always that common peril, that we have. And so that in itself is therapeutic and healing for me. Every single time that I hear, that's why I kind of approached you and said, like, hey, I want to be a part of this, because every time that I hear those things that we have in common, it just reaffirms that I'm not alone and that I'm not crazy and that I'm not a bad person. Right. And that I don't have to be a victim anymore. I can stand up for myself. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And in fact, what you're doing right now is kind of standing up for yourself, you know.
Well, it's, the consequences that this carries for me. We've talked about that,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Because
if
you're
I,
not officially shunned at this point.
no, not officially. I am shunned, but I'm not, it's not on paper yet, but I promise you, it'll get back around and I will be, I'm sure. And if it does, then I've come to terms with that. I've come to peace with that. Um, I love and respect my parents for who they are and what they choose to believe. It's sad that they cannot love and respect me for who I am and what I choose to believe.
Yeah.
But that's just because they're just as brainwashed as I was at one point. So my dad is now baptized and goes to meetings and is just as indoctrinated as my mother. And it's like, I think you were talking about this in one of your earlier podcasts about the secondhand smoke effect.
Okay.
It may have
Continue.
the secondhand smoke effect, where when you smoke around someone, they may not be directly putting it in their lungs, but that secondhand smoke affects them, and like those people can get sick from being in that atmosphere. So it's kind of a horrible analogy, but
but no, it's very true.
It is like that atmosphere that was around my dad. My dad, his family's not really close. So him and my mom and, my mom's family, they were the ones that were around. So he was around this atmosphere of the Jehovah's Witness religion. He was around this cult. He saw, so my mom go through all of these things and, handle her life through the policies of the cult and how, and then what the one thing that really was the turning point for my dad was my mom, the whole blood issue. Jehovah's Witnesses refuse blood transfusions.
Right.
So my mom has always been very ill pretty much my entire life. She's had colon problems. She's had cancer. She's had some serious diseases. She's had surgery after surgery. And so my mom was in surgery a few years back, and the doctors came in and they told them, call your priest or whoever to do the last rites because she's bleeding out and she's not going to make it. She's going to die on the operating table. So my dad, for the first time ever in my life that I had seen, he hit his knees and he was like, Jehovah, we're not on good terms, but if you save my wife, I will do whatever you want. I promise you, I will do whatever she wants me to do. If you just let her live, I'll be a Jehovah's Witness. I'll be a good person. I'll quit drinking completely. I'll quit watching R-rated movies. Like my dad is begging on his hands and knees, just bawling his eyes out. Because I'll tell you what, my parents, they've been through a lot together. Yeah. And they've come out the other side stronger. My parents are just as in love today as they were when they first met. And my parents are a special breed that I don't know how to explain them. On one hand, they're very cold towards me. They won't I don't ever ask them for help, because I know what answer I'm going to get, which is, well, if you were right with Jehovah. So, I just don't,
everything's conditional.
I don't even, yes, it's a conditional love to an extent. And then there's other times where they're so confusing because they will call me to tell me, oh, well, your dad's sick and he's got to have surgery or whatever. So I don't really know how to take that. Again, confusion.
Yeah.
Mixed signals like my whole life for my families. But my dad was just, my mom's his heart, So she came through. Somehow she pulled through that surgery without any blood or blood products or anything. And she was in the hospital for a few weeks and she was really weak, but she made it. And my dad kept his promise, that's what he said he was going to do. So that's what he did. And he studied and he started going to meetings and he got baptized this last year. And
you know what? Maybe he should have become a doctor since it was the doctors that saved him. That saved her.
Yeah, right?
You know what I'm saying?
But
everybody always forgets about the doctors.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the doctors performed the surgery that saved your mom. That's who he really owes something to. But no, I understand, and I understand the emotions of that, and death is something that's bigger than us and that's scary, and you're looking at losing somebody you love, and
Yeah.
I completely see how, emotions get heightened, and you would do anything, to save that person. So,
And he has followed through on that,
yeah.
and it was, I guess it was one of those points where my dad he didn't really have much going for him in the way of his Catholicism anyway. He hadn't gone to the church. He didn't do any of that stuff. So why not? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, wow, one of those why not situations. Well, then it'll just bring me and my wife closer together.
Yeah.
We'll have everything that we can share. So,
And hey, it sounds like it got him to quit drinking too. So, I mean, that's,
well, he quit heavily drinking.
yeah.
I got put in that mental hospital. That was a turning point as well. He quit heavily drinking then. I guess maybe it was a little bit of a wake up call for him at that point. And our dynamic changed at that point too. My dad and I, we don't have as strained of a relationship as my mother and I do. But I still feel like they're unapproachable to me now. Even if I wanted to approach them with something, there'd just be no way that it would be possible. So,
No, it often ends up being pretty one-sided, because Jehovah's Witnesses, have this policy of shunning, and then the only, I guess, loophole in their shunning policy is that a person can be spoken to for, quote, necessary family business.
yes.
But who determines what necessary family business is the witness. So
Yeah.
as the non-witness, you don't get to determine that, they do. And so it becomes this one-sided thing where when they need you, when they want something from you, they will let you know, but
Yes.
otherwise they're probably not going to be there for you.
And the sad thing is, like, Mike, I can't say that there'll ever be a point in time where I'm not there for them if they do call me and need me, because that's family, and I refuse to be that way. I left this cult for a reason, because I didn't want to be that kind of person.
Yeah.
So I refuse to be that person. So whenever my family ever calls me or needs something, I'm going to be there for them, because that's what family's supposed to do for each other.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Are there any questions that I haven't gotten to?
Well, no, we talked about my addiction. We didn't really talk about my recovery as much. So when I did go back,
Yeah.
I needed some rehab. I needed some. I needed a program that would help me learn how to live again, being sober and drug free, and that would help me learn how to some sort of therapeutic, process I could go through to leave all of this crap behind, so that I could be the person that I was meant to be, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that you are.
And when
today.
I went to brothers, when I went to, the brothers in the congregation, they had nothing for me. They just had nothing for me. They treated me like scum of the earth. Most of them, when I went back to the congregation that I was raised in, they would not even look at me. There were 2 people that even were remotely happy to see me.
Mm-hmm.
One of those people you may know.
Yeah. That's okay. You can say it's my mom.
Okay. Well, I didn't know. I didn't want to. Yeah, your mom. Your mom was nice. Nice to me. She really was. She told me, don't worry about what anybody else said. She was just happy to see me. And then another sister, the sister that actually studied with my mom and brought her in, she was very nice to me. I went back several times, and it was the same way every time. Nobody even looked at me. They would just walk past me like I wasn't standing there.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to talk, I talked to my mom and said, Mom, I'm trying here, but I just feel so out of place. I feel like they're never going to let go of my past and let me move on. So she says, well, they're hurt. You hurt them. You have to look at it like this. They put their trust in you that you wouldn't bring reproach upon Jehovah's name, and you did, and they're hurt. So that you have to prove yourself to them before they're going to give you their attention. Mm-hmm. Because they gave you their attention and their love when you were younger and you betrayed it. So now you have to prove yourself. That was her justification, her reasoning behind why they treated me like that.
That sounds loving.
Yeah. So I turned to, a 12-step program through like an Alcoholics Anonymous program.
Yeah.
And I was sponsored by a woman who helped me get down to the root of my problems, who helped me be armed with the facts about who I really am, and helped me blossom into this journey of who do I want to be? Who am I? Like, I really don't know. So let me, I was in the middle of this identity crisis, trying to stay clean and sober, trying to regain everything I had lost in my addiction. And the first place, like I said, that I thought to go was back to the organization. And it was the first place I went, and the first place that turned around and kicked me right back out the door, basically. So I found no solace there. I found no shelter there. There was no refuge for me in the organization. So, but my one of the biggest problems I have, especially with that congregation, is the man who molested me as a child is a member of that congregation still.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he is a member. He goes to that congregation. He may have moved from that congregation now. I don't know. I haven't spoke to him. I don't, my family, when he got out of prison, they just pretended like everything should be fine. Like I should want to be in a room with this man. We had a graduation party. My little brother, it was like a huge thing. He graduated high school. For someone with cerebral palsy and autism, and his is more of like a mental deficiency, like a communication issue, than it is a physical issue. He's not in a wheelchair or anything. He has problems with comprehension. And he's 31 now, but he's got the mentality of like a 15-year-old. So for him to graduate high school was an amazing thing. So I'm with my mom. We are planning his party. I've got decorations. I've rented a place to have his party. I've ordered the cake. I've made all these arrangements, and I'm so excited to give my little brother this graduation party because we're so proud of him. And the night before the party, my mom and dad very casually, very like, I guess, I don't know what the word is, cavalier maybe. They were kind of like, oh, by the way, your uncle's going to be there. And I flipped. I lost my shit. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I've thrown all of my energy and time into this for my little brother, and you know how I feel about him. Why would you do this? And then why would you make it like this surprise? And it's not the first or last time. Like, well, I guess that was kind of the first time that happened, but it wasn't the last time that it happened. They will have cookouts. In the past few years, my parents have had cookouts and family gatherings, or my mom will call me and say, hey, sis, can you come cut my hair? And I'll come, and then it's like, I'm in the middle of cutting her hair. Oh, your uncle's on his way over, and they're looking for a house down here, and they're going to spend the night and go to the meeting with us tomorrow. And like, how can this man who robbed not only me, but other girls in our family of our innocence, who may have remorse, but doesn't show it as far as I can see, who has still never admitted to this day that he hurt me, how is he not shunned? But I am. It's completely backwards.
So he's supposed to be accepted. Now, come on, Kacey, look, you should just forgive and forget. Okay. now what you did, that's unforgivable and unforgettable. But what he did, I mean, come on, just let it slide.
When it happened, Mike, he was just studying. He wasn't baptized until later when he got out of prison.
Oh, so see, it was okay. It was okay.
God erased all that in the books. Yeah. But I was baptized. So what I did was reproach on Jehovah and on the organization. I tarnished their name. He didn't tarnish their name. They didn't tarnish their name by protecting pedophiles and by punishing the victims.
Yeah. He tarnished you.
He tarnished me, and then I in turn tarnished their organization. I'm the one who needs to be shunned, right?
Yeah, you haven't done anything in this whole and everything that you've explained so far. The only person that you have hurt so far is you.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything that hurt anybody else. You took it out on yourself. Yeah. And he actively hurt other people. And yet he's cool because of some stupid organizational technicality, which like nowhere, show me in the Bible where it says that once you're baptized, everything you do thereafter counts. But before you're baptized, none of that counts. Like,
Yeah.
where is that? That's not
And
there.
I, yeah. And the fact that they would protect him and that he's in this congregation with other
With
people,
kids?
okay, and that my family allows him to come around. And I lost custody of my son, okay, my middle son. And he lived with my brother. And I am now, I've been clean and sober a little over 3.5 years. So I'm really proud of that. And I'm still working towards regaining all of the things that I gave away and I lost when I was in my addiction. My kids being one of those things. Now, my 8-year-old, he lived with my brother. And my brother, knowing how I felt about this, and nobody ever protected me. Nobody ever stood up for me. Not out of my older brothers, my own father, my mother. Nobody ever stood up for me and said, what about how I feel?
Right.
And I'm not trying to be poor, pitiful me now, because it's over with. And I either have to get over it and move on from my own sanity. I can't sit in that. I've had enough years of resentment over it. However, when I tell my brother how I feel about that, and although he has custody of my son, when he is allowing this person to be around my children, it drove me insane. It's something that I will never be able to accept. I will never accept that you allowed this known pedophile around my children.
Yeah.
No, it's not okay. The kids are home. And I am locked in the bedroom, but they are still, they want the mama.
Well, let me ask you. So I know there was, you can choose to talk about this or not, but there was one witness who tried to help you out with your kid, right?
Yes. So that brother that I was telling you about that never lost his humanity and was a really good guy.
Right.
His wife. Okay, so I was incarcerated for a while. I was actually clean and sober at the time that I was incarcerated, but because of another technicality of a program I was in, I was put in jail. And my son was only 6 weeks old. My youngest, I have a 2-year-old, Cole. He was only 6 weeks old when I got put in jail. And I got out and then was put right back in because I disagreed to go to this long-term rehab they wanted me to go to when I was already clean and sober. But I'm a felon, so I'm kind of like, I signed my soul over to the Commonwealth when I committed felony. So,
right.
So I don't really have a choice. I have to do what they say or go back to jail. Well, for the first time in my life, I held to my integrity and said, no, I'm not doing this. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm going to stand up for myself, and I'm not going to go get shipped off 4 hours away from home. I want to go home to my kids. Well, they put me back in jail, and this sister wrote me in jail, and she told me that since I had chosen a life of immorality and drugs and crime and couldn't be a mother to my children, that I should just let her adopt my son out to someone in a congregation, because there were people out there who would actually care about my son and give him a chance at a good life serving Jehovah. But she wasn't even that nice about it. She was not, she was very dry about it. Basically just, it was the only sensible thing for me to do. Why I would be doing my son a disservice if I didn't sign him over to her and let her adopt him. And this lady, she's never been a nice person in general. Maybe somewhere down deep inside of her she is, but from, she's like a third generation or more JW. So she never had a chance to have a humanity side to her. She's a mindless drone. She wasn't even born with humanity as far as I see it. Most of the elders and people in the congregation don't see you as anything more than the number on your publisher's card.
Yep.
And that's how she saw me, but she saw a chance at redemption through my son. So she wanted to take my son from me. And that's one time my mom did kind of stand up for me, though. She was like, absolutely not. If anybody's going to have your son, it's going to be me. So she had no problem promptly telling this woman to screw off. Yeah. If any mindless drone is going to raise my son to love Jehovah, it's going to be my mother.
Well, let me ask you. So how much of that letter was about helping you?
None of it. Absolutely none of it.
Oh,
She came to
really?
visit
They just
me one
want.
time.
I'm just
She,
shocked that they would only want what they wanted.
she came to visit me one time in the jail, and that's all she talked about was what were my plans, because I lived in a trailer park that they owned at the time. I lived in a house. So what were my plans with my trailer? Because they really needed to move my stuff out and get somebody else in there if I wasn't going to be living there. And what did I decide to do about my son? And I just hung the phone up and turned my back and waited to be let out of the visitation room.
So you were behind the glass,
Yes, I
and you'd
was
rather
behind.
go back
She
into
lucky
prison
I was
than talk
behind the
to
glass.
her.
So I might have got another charge if I hadn't been. Oh man. Yeah, there was no concern for me, or is there anything they could do to help me, or not even let me read the scripture and pray with you.
Yeah.
You know, it was like all business.
No, they were done with you. They just wanted your kid.
Yeah, they wanted my offspring.
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, it is sad. It,
Is there anything that you would like people that have never been witnesses to know?
Don't do it. It's a trap. No. Not look. It's not all the people in the organization. Okay, there are some good people in that organization, but as you said earlier, the majority of the time, those people are the ones who end up leaving because they wake up. I don't think it's just an organization of these evil, vile, wicked people. However, I do believe that at the top of that pyramid are some evil and vile and selfish people who dole down these principles and these policies. And the organization itself is just, it's a very crooked place. And I would not raise my children to be raised like I was. I wouldn't do that. You know, just do your research. If there's ever anything, if you've ever thought about studying with a member of Jehovah's Witnesses or being a Jehovah's Witness, just do your research. What they're going to tell you is everything that isn't pro JW is a lie. That's been handed down by apostates because they are a part of Satan and the world. But that's not the case. Do your research. And you know, if it's something, you know, you really want and you think you could be happy, then by all means. But from my experience, I'm really lucky to be alive today.
Yeah, very much.
And I will never go back to that. I will never go back to making myself feel worthless or making myself feel like I'm not good enough. Because, you know, the religion will tell people that I left because I'm a sinner and I'm immoral, and I let the world and Satan take place of Jehovah in the organization. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you that I never had the love for Jehovah in my heart. That's not true. I have a very big heart. I'm a very loving person. My husband gets mad at me sometimes because I go out of my way to help other people. And I would take away from myself still to help someone else. A part of that is probably my people pleasing. Mm-hmm. A part of it is just because I have a lot of compassion and because I've been in a lot of dark places in my life. So to see someone else in a dark place where they need help, it hits me in the feels. I can't help it. You know, I want to help in any way I can.
And that's a beautiful quality that you would think that witnesses would have, but they only help people conditionally. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You know, my husband was interested in going to this non-denominational Christian church. And my son's grandparents are a part of this church. And, you know, we went there Father's Day last year. I went for him as like a part of his Father's Day gift, you know. Mm-hmm. And I have never felt more love from any religious organization. But it's not like your normal church, you know. It's not like your normal church policies where there's no like rank and file there. These people just treated me like a person. Yeah. They didn't care if I was hitting my vape, my e-cigarette. They didn't care that I have tattoos. They didn't care that my hair was purple. They didn't care that You know what I mean? They were just like, hey, we're just happy you're here. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your life. Is there anything you need? How can we help you? And that to me spoke volumes about how these worldly organizations are supposed to be so horrible and evil, and how we are supposed to avoid them at all costs, but how these people didn't know me from anybody. And they reached out a hand and a loving embrace to me, and were just from day one, just nice, down to earth people. There was nothing fake about them.
Yeah.
But this organization who raised me, who saw me from the age of 2 grow up into a young lady, into a girl, into a young woman, who should have had some sort of emotional investment in me, because they've known me since I was a baby.
Yeah.
How they have absolutely nothing to offer me. They have no assistance. They have no help. They have not even a nice word, not even a harsh word. They just pretend like I don't even exist.
Yeah, you're just a ghost to them.
You know, it just shows like this parallel. It's everything I needed to know for me to finally leave and just say I'm done, you know, and there's consequences, and so be it. But I feel like if my story can help one person who is on that fence about whether or not they should leave, who's having doubts, who's experienced anything like what I've experienced, who's had their sexual abuse or domestic abuse covered up by this organization, whose parents were told not to go to the police, who was made to feel like everything in their life was their fault. If I can help one person to overcome and feel less alone, it's worth the consequences, because I'm going to walk in my truth today, and I'm going to be free in my truth. And I don't have to be afraid of them anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's
very freeing.
You think that pledging your allegiance to this organization, to this cult, is going to give you some deep and personal spiritual connection, that you're going to rise up and feel like you have this conscious contact with Jehovah, like he's truly reaching his Holy Spirits out, you know, out there, you're being showered in it. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's not until I left completely and finally said enough is enough that I felt any sort of spiritual freedom.
Yeah.
And I would hate to think that there's someone out there who is scared and who didn't get that help because I didn't speak out. You know what I mean?
No, I totally understand. So then let me give you the chance to speak out again. If you could say anything to your family and friends that shun you, or, I mean, let's face it, you know, there could be consequences even of this conversation. You know, so let's say, you know, you have a last chance to say something to these people. What would you say?
I would say I love you and I forgive you. And no matter what you ever do, I'm going to love you. And, you know, I'm really sorry that you can't feel the same way about me. My love, I refuse to put conditions on my love. And I hope, and if I really prayed like that, I would pray and petition that maybe they wake up and do their own research.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
Yeah, because I've had a beautiful opportunity to actually be my own person. And, you know, I'm not sorry. I love them, but I'm not sorry. I'm just not. I'm not going to apologize for being who I am. And that even if they don't love me unconditionally, I will always love them unconditionally.
Well, that is certainly a larger love than a love that only exists as long as you toe a certain line. And so, you know, it's beautiful when you get free and you can learn what love really is instead of what you and I were taught as kids.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there anything, you know, other than, well, there you go, other than that love, you know, is there anything that you've learned since you left that's really, you know, made your life better?
Just that I don't have to be ashamed of who I am. I don't have to hide. I don't have to live by that fear, obligation, guilt anymore. And, you know, I mean, I enjoy my life today. I enjoy celebrating my children's birthdays and not having guilt because I have imperfections. I can embrace those imperfections today and not criticize myself constantly. And I'm a happier person. I'm very happily married, uh, to the love of my life. He supports me unconditionally. He loves me unconditionally. He loves my children unconditionally. I've never had that type of love before. Had I stuck in that organization and been put into another arrangement of marriage, I probably would have never found that.
Sure.
And so I'm grateful for the life I have today. I don't regret one bit of it. And honestly, being the person that I am today and being grateful for that person, everything that I went through in my life led up to me being here at this moment right now. So there's no point in me saying I would have changed a thing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Do you have any dreams and anything that you're wanting to do here in this free life?
Why, yes, I do. Uh, well, my husband and I own our own business. We own a carpentry business. He does remodeling, restoration. He likes to build furniture and use reclaimed wood. So we're working on that, working on building that up so that it's something he can be independent with. And also, I am actually working with that non-denominational church right now on some outreach programs for we do a lot of work with people in our own community. Some of the ladies, they actually take like recycled plastic grocery bags and they make sleeping mats for homeless people. We cook, we take food out and feed the homeless population as much as we can downtown. We collect blankets, socks, hats, coats, shoes, get together things that are kind of necessities like hygiene packs for people. And I feel like that's important for me to give back. It was something that I never would have done had I stayed a Jehovah's Witness, because they don't, they don't do that. They don't care about their community. They don't truly care about humanity. If you're in their circle, if you're in their bubble, great. But even then, you're not going to have any type of outreach.
No.
If you're working that minimum wage job because you never went to college and you're struggling to make ends meet because Jehovah's Witnesses tell you that you don't need to put your faith in anything of this world because, the end is near for like 100 years now. And so, you're not going to be able to go to them and say, oh, yeah, can I go to the food pantry this month because we're running a little short on food? Or is there any way that the organization could help us pay our rent because otherwise we're going to get evicted with our kids? Those kind of things. So my goal at this point is to open and run a halfway house for families that are struggling with addiction and who are trying to rebuild their life, to give them a halfway point. So once they get clean and sober, this will give them a place where they can come with their kids and they can get back on their feet and they can and have resources with help finding a job and learn how to budget and manage their money so that they can save and eventually move out on their own and live their own life, clean and sober. If I hadn't had people tell me how to do those things and show me and help me, I wouldn't be here today. So I want to give back in that aspect. And also, part of my 5-year plan as my husband's business grows is to open a rescue for animals. Probably more for dogs than anything. However, any animal, I'm not to like a rehabilitation center for animals who have either been tossed to the side or put in a kill shelter. Those are my two passions, right? So helping the less fortunate, I suppose, because I was that less fortunate for so long. And someone reached out to help me, and I feel like it's the least I can do to give back and kind of, I guess, put my own good karma out there in the world for those who reached out to me and helped me. And I found a real passion and a real knack for it. I really like helping people, and I'm really good at it. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it helps me heal. It helps me heal a lot to get out of myself and, like I said, get out of that victim stance and stand up and say I don't have to be a victim anymore. I can help other people, and and look at me. I'm leading a better life.
Yep.
I'm not going to let that stuff rule me anymore.
It's pretty cool to to see that, out of all of this, um, all the trauma, all the drama, all the everything, that you've come out of it, and um, as this strong woman who can live her own life. You have your own family. You're wanting that. You're not only wanting to help others, but you're able to help others now, and that you've taken your life back. I mean, that's what leaving any of these cults. Unfortunately, there's shunning that comes along with it, but it's not just about the shunning. There's so much more that we get on the outside when we
Yeah.
get away from all that toxicity. And now you have a chance to make your life what you want it, and to instead of looking forward to some promised paradise in the future that seems to
Yeah.
keep delaying, you get to have those things now, and that's awesome. I mean,
Exactly.
here's your
And
one chance.
I have a whole, since I've reached out, I have like a whole family of people who have been shunned, who they treat me like family. They treat me like better than any person in the religion ever did. And it's so nice to have that network of support.
Yep.
And, like, I know we touched on this already, but it's not as scary to be shunned when you find that you can take your life back and that you can reach out and have that individuality. It's not as scary anymore.
Yep.
Because you when you realize you don't have to belong to them to exist. In fact, you're not doing anything above existing in that organization. When you come to the realization that you can have your own identity, and that you can kind of, when you take your power back, it's not as scary anymore to be shunned. It's really not, because there's a whole other life out there of people who are 100 times more compassionate, loving, and caring than the people in the organization ever were. It turned out as a blessing in disguise being shunned, in my opinion.
I agree. There's few things in life are all good or all bad. Being shunned by your family, missing those people, that is bad, and that does hurt. But there's I wouldn't trade the benefits on the other side for that ever. So
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
as always, I want to thank Kacey for being brave enough to speak her truth. It's not easy to do so, especially when that truth could cause problems for yourself. But in the end, that's what Jehovah's Witnesses taught us to do, right? Don't be mad because we're taking a stand for what we see as true. You taught us to do that. So good for Kacey for doing so. If you'd like to leave a note of encouragement for Kacey, you can go to shunnedpodcast.com, and you'll see her episode at the top of the episodes page. Please do so for all the brave people that face their fears and tell their stories. We were all taught that if we were to go away, we should at least do so quietly by the cults. So, it's kind of reminiscent of what any abuser would tell their victims. You can go away, but shut up. Well, one way to speak up is to show support for the guests here. Another way you can show support is to leave us a good review on iTunes. It helps lend legitimacy to the show, and it helps us rise up in the rankings so that other people can find us too. Of course, this show does cost money to produce, and you'll notice that the transcriptions are up now for each new episode due to the amazing donors that give as little as $1 a month to the show through Patreon. Our numbers of listeners continue to grow, and having those transcripts up helps us to get traffic to the site, and then that traffic in turn turns to new listeners. So if you'd like to help financially, you can do so at patreon.com/shunned. In fact, this month I have 2 new patrons to thank. I'd like to give a thank to someone called Covert Fade, and also to Zachary and their families for signing up. Again, every dollar helps. I'm putting the money back into the podcast, and the more that there is, the more I can do. Speaking of Covert Fade, some of you may know him on Twitter. That's where I found him as well. He's been kind to the Shunned podcast himself, and he started his own podcast called JW Forwardcast. Again, that's JW _cast, one word. And you might want to check that out. It's pretty cool. Speaking of Twitter, some of you that follow this podcast actually follow it on Twitter and Instagram. Well, for all this time, my wife Jenny has been making most of the initial post, and then I've joined in at times when needed or in private messages with friends and things like that. Well, now she is taking over all that. So if you go onto Instagram or Twitter, that's my wife Jenny, and I'm really happy to have somebody that supports me in all this. It means a lot, and you can support her as well by stopping by and saying hi to her on those platforms. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram as Shunned Podcast, one word. You can also find my new vidcasts on YouTube under the same name, Shunned Podcast, again, one word. I just put out 2 new episodes of that in July, one about comparison and one about how the cult stole our problems. In fact, that the latter one had an article in it from the great Jehovah. So a shout out to Jehovah, who is an online friend of mine and who wrote that article. So subscribe there and you'll get new videos as I produce them. If you want to hear my personal story, you can find it by listening to the podcast called This JW Life, also found at thisjwlife.com. If you want links to anything mentioned here, you can find all of that on the show notes. You can find the show notes either by going to shunnedpodcast.com and going to the post for each episode, or you can probably just on whatever podcast app you're using, you can just look at the description and that should have the notes. You probably noticed that we have a new theme song today. One of our Instagram friends gave us a song to use called No Hell Yet. So No Hell Yet is the song, and her name on SoundCloud is Fair Voyeur. She has other songs as well that you can listen to, so I'll be sure to link in the show notes to the song that she gave us, and you can listen to more of her music there as well. So thank you so much to her for sharing that. All right. So this is where I usually tell you something about the next episode. Instead, I'm going to tell you that you're about to get a lot of new episodes. For the next couple of months, I'm going to be doing some extras. I have an episode coming out in mid-August at some point from a former witness that has a book coming out. And I have a regular episode coming out then afterward at the beginning of September, as per usual, with another former witness. I then have a special interview that I'm doing with someone that was formerly of the Amish faith that will come out in mid-September ahead of a big Amish conference. And right after that, at the beginning of October, we'll have another regularly scheduled episode coming out by another ex-witness. So instead of 1 a month, you're about to get 5 podcast episodes in short order for some special circumstances. And then we're going to get back into the regular swing of things. So watch out for the new episodes. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and do so that you get them automatically. And as we end them all, go into the world and love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
Curse God